Add hand-drawn elements to make your card stand out. You will notice an immediate effect as soon as you add a hand-drawn element because it is always unique to you and your style of drawing. Hello everyone, welcome to Creative Coloring with Erum. So those of you who stopped by my blog have seen this card before and requested a video. And I wanted to share how I added these two very different hand-drawn elements to set my card apart from the other one that I created. I will be using inks to color today, and I have these two inks out, the Coral Bliss and the Canyon Clay. We have such beautiful colors in the dye ink families, but we rarely use them to watercolor with. I think we should use them more often as they are so stunning and we have a wide range of colors too. And these inks that I'm using are quite different from each other. One has a orangey hue to it, the Canyon Clay, and the other one is pink, more coral, that is Coral Bliss. I think they will work very well together. I'm going to start by smooshing some of the ink onto the watercolor palette. Then I will apply water to one petal and add a light concentration of Coral Bliss pigment. Just look how beautifully it blooms. I love watercoloring with Sunkissed Dye Inks, and you can go back in and add a more concentrated pigment right from the start to build layers. But as always, I'll be revisiting the petals once I have colored all of them. And on the left portion of the petal, I'm adding a diluted pigment of Canyon Clay ink. Then clean your brush to spread it outwards towards the tip of the petal so that it is a little more diluted than what we just put on. Since the petal is still wet, both shades will mix a little bit and form a gorgeous two-tone effect. And this is only the first layer of color. You can choose to dry this petal and add more layers of color right now, or move on to the next petal and come back to add the details later. You can also choose to skip the petals next to the one that you are coloring. I'm not really bothered by that. I actually try to leave a fine space between the two petals so the colors don't mix. But even if they do, this is not the type of coloring that would affect the look of the flower. So unless the contamination of the pigment between the petals is affecting the look of the flower, or the shading, or the petals lose their shape because of it, I generally do not overthink this. But I have noticed that I'm usually a little careful while coloring. It has become a habit. So you wet the petal, apply Coral Bliss pigment, clean the brush, and then apply Canyon Clay pigment. Once the entire flower has color on it, I will go back in to add more pigment where I want to show shadows. So this will be in places where the petals are overlapping and closer to where they are joined to the center. This looks gorgeous and you can stop right here. But if you like texture on your flowers and you don't want the satiny finish to the petals, you can go ahead and add a bit more pigment by bouncing the brush a little bit and moving it towards the tip. This will add softer, muted stippling, but you will see that there is a difference. You can make this more prominent by adding pigmented stippling. For the next flower, I will add water to the petal, then drop in Canyon Clay pigment. The second shade that I will add is Sunkissed pigment from the Sunkissed Dye Ink. On this one, I left the adjacent petal because my water went into that petal. And I am aiming for the sun-kissed look on the tip of the petals, and if the two petals pigment mix now, this might ruin the shading. Because I want that Canyon Clay pigment near the flower center and the sun-kissed pigment, the yellowy hue pigment onto the tips of the petals as to show highlight. On this flower, I will keep the tips lighter. I'm going for a more artsy look for this flower. I'm leaving a bit of white outline here and not covering the entire petal with color. And this turned out so beautiful. I'm always surprised when I watercolor with crisp dye inks. That's why I love them as a watercoloring medium. If you have never tried the crisp dye inks as watercolors, you definitely should include them in your watercoloring project the next time. On this flower, I will add a bit more prominent stippling. Because the petals are still wet, a few of them, the ones that I colored at the very end, the stippling on those will look more diffused. But the petals I colored first are a tad dry and will have more prominent stippling. For the leaves, I will smoosh some of the Misty Moor, Marshland, Sea Forest and Mangrove Root dye inks onto the watercolor palette. You don't need all 4 colors to color. Only the second lightest and the darkest will do as well. I love the 2 dark greens in this one, especially the Mangrove Root. I will apply water to the leaf, then add lightest color as a color wash, which is Misty Moor. Then I will add the Marshland in the middle portion. I'm just dropping in the color and trying not to take it outwards towards the edge of the leaf so that the edge of the leaf is lighter. Then I will add Sea Forest and after this Mangrove Root to the middle of the leaf. I will add the darkest color as stippling, soft stippling, and once this dries, I will come back in again and add more prominent stippling. The stippling becomes more obvious if the layer underneath is dry, so dry between layers for a more prominent result. For the flower center, I will use Warm Sunshine pigment. Again, I will apply water and add a diluted color wash. Then I will go back in and add a C shape to the flower center. This will be more pigmented. Next, I will add a bit of caramel toffee pigment at the base and also a bit of paperback pigment, which is the darkest in the Summer Afternoon Ink family. So this is the arrangement I want to go with, but I want a flower cluster on the top right. I noticed that in the coloring stencil, we have a cluster of flowers with the layers. For this, I will start with the Wisteria Dye Ink. And I will be adding a few colors here from different ink families. I will try to make this warmer to match the other 2 flowers that I have watercolored. Next, I will add a bit of Puffy Heart pigment. And this is just in the center. Through the same first layer of stencil, I'm also going to be adding a bit of Canyon clay. Just do a couple of points on this bunch. I will be very careful while doing this as this might make the inks a bit muddy. For the second layer, I will again use a mix of inks, starting first by adding purple wine. And if you notice, I'm keeping the concentration of this on the center, and on the edges, I will add Ultraviolet Crisp Dye Ink. So my flowers are not really very purple, not very pink. They are something in between, like a magenta kind of a color, but has some purple tones to it as well. And I also add that Canyon clay to add a bit of warmth to it so that it gels with the 2 flowers that I watercolored. I could use my favorite detail blending brushes here, but the look I'm going for, I don't need to switch the tool. This will blend the inks well together. But for the third layer, I am using the blending brush and applying the Andromeda Dye Ink, as this will create a beautiful, stark, dark flower center. Now these will look odd and flat with the watercolor flowers. So I will take a black pen. You can use the Fineliner Pen Set by Alternate to do this and doodle outlines to the flowers. This outline doesn't need to be perfect. I will also add flower centers and add a few dots both in black and then a few in white too. When I added the white dots, I thought that I could do something else too, but first I added another flower bunch to the left side just to balance the arrangement. And because this is too dark, bold and pigmented compared to the watercolor flowers that are very soft looking and have a little bit of a muted tone, I will add a few white splatters as well to the stenciled flowers only. Before arranging the flowers, I will add a few black paint splatters. Now I'm just going to mark some points where my flowers would go and then use a T ruler to add a few lines. These lines will be very sketchy and irregular, broken lines. For this, I'm using the Alt New Fineliner Pens. 005 is the one I chose to use. I don't want my lines or my grid to be super prominent, but just as part of the background, a subtle addition to acting as a base for the floral arrangement. I will keep placing the arrangement to see if I need more lines. And like this, I need this to look balanced. And once I'm satisfied, I'll adhere the images with foam tape. For the leaves, I will use liquid adhesive. I also thought I would add a few control splatters using artist marker in jet black. Then I went ahead and added more lines because there was nothing on the top there and it was bothering me so much. I will then stem the sentiment and my card is done. Just adding these hand-drawn elements separates your cards from others as it has unique elements. Even you can't replicate them if you tried. They will be close but not replicas. You will always achieve a different result unless Alt New comes up with a stamp like this. Thank you for watching everyone. Bye.